arguing before I ever understood what they were arguing about. It was sometime after midnight. I hadn't been sleeping well for days, and that night was no different. I was lying on my back, staring into the dark, listening to the quiet settle into the walls, the way it does in unfamiliar places. The kind of silence that feels occupied, like something is already there before you notice it. At first, I thought the voices were coming from the road, distant, low, the kind of background noise you can almost ignore. Then one of them said my name, not loudly, not in panic, just used it like it belonged in the conversation. That's when my body reacted before my mind could catch up. I sat up slowly, every muscle tightening, and held my breath so I could hear better. There were at least 3 of them, maybe more. Their voices overlapped, but not in chaos. It wasn't a fight. It was controlled, measured, like they were discussing something that mattered too much to get loud about. "You had him last night," one voice said. Another answered immediately, defensive but quiet. "No, that doesn't count. She was half asleep." A pause followed, heavy, deliberate. Then someone closer to the house, too close, said, "It still counts." I felt something inside me shift. Not panic, not yet. Just a slow, cold awareness spreading through my chest. I stayed perfectly still, listening harder. "She'll notice," a third voice said. "Not if you're careful. She's already noticing," someone else replied, softer this time. There was a brief silence. Then the sentence that I still hear, even now when everything is quiet. "Let him go back inside. If he stays too long, she'll know." I don't remember deciding to lie back down, but I did. Slowly, carefully, like any sudden movement might somehow make them aware of me listening. My eyes stayed open. The darkness in the room felt thicker after that, heavier, like it had weight. I tried to think logically, tried to place what I'd heard into something that made sense, but every explanation I came up with collapsed the moment I replayed their words. "You had him last night. Let him go back inside." It didn't fit. Nothing fit. And then, sometime close to dawn, I heard the front door unlock. Not forced, not broken, unlocked. The sound was quiet, but in that silence, it carried through the house like a signal. My entire body went rigid. Footsteps followed, slow, familiar, unhurried. They moved through the hallway with the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing the space. No hesitation, no uncertainty. They stopped outside my bedroom. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened. I didn't turn my head. I didn't move at all. I forced my breathing into a slow, steady rhythm, the way it is when you're asleep but not dreaming. I felt him before I heard him. That subtle shift in the room, that presence. The footsteps came closer, each one soft, controlled. They stopped beside the bed. There was a long pause, long enough that I wondered if he was watching me. And then, quietly, in a voice I knew intimately, "You're awake." I didn't respond. I kept my eyes closed, my face relaxed, my breathing even. Another pause. Then a soft exhale, almost amused. "Next time," he said, barely above a whisper, "don't stand by the window." My chest tightened so suddenly I thought it might break my composure. I forced myself not to react. The mattress dipped as he sat down. The movement was subtle, but I felt it in my bones. Then his hand brushed against my arm. Warm, real, familiar, in a way that made everything worse. Because I knew that touch. I had learned it over months. Memorized it without realizing I was doing it. And yet, something about it felt slightly delayed, like the intention came a fraction of a second before the action. Like he was remembering how. I met him 6 months earlier. It started simply. A message about a photograph I'd posted. A quiet conversation that turned into something longer without either of us forcing it. He was easy to talk to. That's the simplest way to explain it. There was no performance in him, no obvious attempt to impress. He asked questions, listened to the answers, and responded in a way that felt grounded. We talked about ordinary things at first. Work, daily routines, the kind of small details you don't usually share unless you feel comfortable with someone. Then, gradually, the conversations got deeper. Late nights, longer calls. He told me he lived in a small village, far from the noise of the city. The way he described it made it sound peaceful, isolated, but in a comforting way. "No one bothers you there," he told me once. "You start to notice things you'd usually ignore." I remember asking, "Like what?" There was a pause before he answered. "Patterns." At the time, I laughed. Now I wish I hadn't. He didn't send many photos of himself, just a few, always slightly off. Not bad, just not clear enough to study. I didn't think anything of it. People are private. It made sense. When he asked me to visit, it didn't feel sudden. It felt like the natural next step. "You'd like it here," he said. "It's quiet." I thought I needed that. I didn't realize what kind of quiet he meant. The village was smaller than I expected. Not just small, contained. a handful of houses spread out just enough to give the illusion of space. No shops, no obvious center, no movement unless you were looking directly at it. It felt paused. The people noticed me immediately. Not openly, not rudely, but their attention lingered a second longer than it should have. Their eyes followed just a bit too precisely. There was curiosity there, but also something else, something harder to name. He was waiting for me when I arrived, standing by the road, exactly where he said he'd be. When I saw him in person, I felt relief first. He looked like himself, mostly. But there were small inconsistencies, the kind you can't point to directly. A slight delay in expression, a smile that stayed just a fraction too long, eye contact that felt practiced rather than natural. I ignored it. I told myself I was overanalyzing. That first night was easy. We talked for hours, about everything, about nothing. He moved through the house naturally, confidently, like it belonged to him. For a while, I let myself relax. The second night was when something shifted. He came into the bedroom later than I expected. Quietly, carefully, the same way I would later hear him enter after those voices outside. I was half asleep when he laid down beside me, but my body reacted. Not fully awake, not fully aware, just alert. His breathing wasn't quite right. The rhythm was slightly uneven, too controlled in some moments, too slow in others. When he shifted, it felt deliberate, measured, like each movement had been thought through beforehand. I kept my eyes closed, listened, waited. After a while, he reached out and touched my arm. The same gesture, the same placement, but there was hesitation in it. A fraction of a second where his hand hovered, like he was recalling where it was supposed to go. I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe that. The next morning, he was normal again, completely normal. He laughed easily, moved naturally, spoke without that strange delay. If I hadn't experienced the night before, I would never have questioned anything. So I didn't bring it up. I should have, because the pattern didn't stop. Every night, something was slightly off. Not enough to accuse, not enough to prove, just enough to notice. Sometimes it was his voice, a word placed incorrectly, a tone that didn't match the moment. Sometimes it was memory. Once, I mentioned a story he had told me about his childhood. He looked at me for a moment, not confused, calculating. Then he smiled. We never talked about that. The certainty in his voice made me hesitate, but I knew we had. I remembered the conversation clearly, the way he avoided certain details, the way his voice had changed, but he insisted, calm, patient, like I was the one making a mistake. After that, I started watching more closely, listening more carefully. That's when I began noticing the others. At first, it was just movement, a figure at the edge of my vision that disappeared when I focused on it, shadows shifting behind trees, presence without confirmation. I dismissed it. New environment, unfamiliar surroundings. Your brain tries to fill the gaps. That's what I told myself, until the night I saw them clearly. I couldn't sleep. The air in the house felt too still, too heavy. I got up and walked to the kitchen, trying not to wake him. As I passed the window, something pulled my attention toward it. Movement. I stepped closer, and I saw them. 3 men, maybe 4, standing at the edge of the yard, talking. Their bodies were angled toward each other, close enough to suggest familiarity. Their voices were low, controlled. I couldn't hear the words from that distance, but I could feel the tension. One of them stepped forward into the faint spill of light from the house, and I saw his face. Everything inside me locked up, because it was him, exactly him. Same features, same posture, same expression. Before I could process it, another one turned his head, and it was the same face again. Not similar, not close, the same. My thoughts didn't break, they just stopped. I stepped back from the window slowly, my body moving without instruction. Then I heard the front door open behind me, inside the house. I froze. Footsteps moved through the hallway, familiar, comforting in any other moment. And then his voice, soft, casual, perfectly normal. "Hey, what are you doing up?" I turned around. I had to, and there he was, standing in the doorway, exactly the way he always looked. I stayed. That's the part I still struggle to understand. I'd seen enough to leave. More than enough. But I stayed another night, because I needed it to make sense. Because I thought there had to be an explanation, something rational, something human. Instead, I heard them arguing outside my window, arguing about who got to be him. And that's when everything finally aligned. Not in a way that made sense, but in a way that made denial impossible. I left the next morning, quietly, carefully. I didn't tell him. I didn't say goodbye. I packed my things while he was still in bed, or pretending to be. I didn't check. I couldn't. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror once, just once. They were standing at the edge of the road, all of them, perfectly still, watching me. Same face, same expression, no movement, no reaction, just watching. I haven't gone back. I won't. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I hear voices outside my window again, low, calm, familiar, and every now and then, I hear my front door unlock, slow footsteps in the hallway, a pause outside my room, and a voice, soft and certain, "You shouldn't have left."